Welcome to Unplugged.
Unplugged.
Welcome to Unplugged.
Unplugged.
Revisited.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Unplugged Revisited, the podcast that celebrates, critiques, and dives deep into the last 3.5 decades of MTV Unplugged. I'm your host, music journalist, pop culture anthropologist, and Unplugged obsessive, Will Hodge. My guest this week is the Double Diamond certified, and just to be clear, that's 20 million albums shipped of just one record in the US alone. The Double Diamond certified lead guitarist and co-founder of one of the most undeniably successful and inarguably polarizing bands of the entire 1990s.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Mark Bryan from Hootie and the Blowfish, and you're listening to Unplugged Revisited.
That's right, Hootie and the Blowfish, whose 1996 MTV Unplugged was yet another curious, multi-layered entry in a series of curious, multi-layered milestones that this Columbia, South Carolina bar band turned bestsellers of all time quickly accumulated within a dynamically explosive period of popularity and backlash throughout the mid to late 90s. And if you're listening to this episode on the day it drops, yesterday, April 22nd, was the 29th anniversary of Hootie's Unplugged broadcast, and today, April 23rd, is the 29th anniversary of their second album, Fairweather Johnson. So yes, that means their Unplugged was positioned as a bit of a new album drops tomorrow quasi-listening party, which may have informed the overall vibe of the show, but more on that in a bit. No matter where you fall on the Hootie spectrum, love 'em, loathe 'em, or somewhere in between, I think today's episode will have some really fun stuff for you. Me personally, I was not the Hootie target demo. I was only 14 when their debut album, Cracked Rear View, came out in the summer of '94. That was the same summer as Weezer's Blue album, Outkast's Southern Playalistic, Offspring's Smash, STP's Purple, Nas' Illmatic, Oasis' Definitely Maybe, Beastie's Ill Communication. Singles like Juicy, Regulate, Stay, I Missed You, and Fantastic Voyage, 9 Inch Nails and Green Day at an incredibly muddy Woodstock 94, you get the picture. Hootie had zero chance of getting through all that, at least to my 14-year-old self.
I'm just not in a very Hootie place right now.
But while I wasn't amongst Hootie's mostly college-anchored, frat-heavy fan base, I hadn't even started high school yet, the band does fascinate me from a pop culture anthropological standpoint. Plus, I do think they have a sonically attuned sixth sense for cover song selection and execution. So, as far as Hootie as a pop cultural entity, there's no two ways about it. Dig 'em or don't, they are quantifiably one of the best-selling artists, not just of the 90s, but of all time. As of its most recent RIAA certification just last summer, Cracked Rear View has shipped over 22 million copies. The actual Double Diamond certification for 20 million happened back in 2018. This most recent certification was for 22 times platinum. That places it within the top 10 best-selling albums of all time just on US sales alone, and situates it somewhere above Fleetwood Mac's Rumors, certified 21 times platinum as of its last certification in the summer of 2023, and below Led Zeppelin 4, which was last certified 24 times platinum back in 2021. Now, for context, the only other album from the 1990s to appear in that top 10 list is Shania Twain's Come On Over from '97, which has been sitting at 20 times platinum since 2004. However, if you expand out to the top 20 best-selling albums of all time, again based on US sales, a handful of other 90s releases appear. Garth Brooks' No Fences from 1990 at 18 times platinum, Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill from '95 at 17 times platinum, and Metallica's self-titled aka Black album from '91 at 16 times platinum. All that to say, I would bet that if you asked 100 random people on the street, Family Feud style, to name the top 5 90s albums, not top 5 albums that were released in the 1990s, but all caps zeitgeist encapsulating quote-unquote 90s albums, I would venture to guess that only 2 of those records, Alanis and Hootie, would actually show up on the board, and probably for vastly different reasons, but that's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother time. For listeners that weren't plugged into 90s US mass media, or maybe weren't even born yet, back in the mid to late 90s, whether you were Hootie's biggest fan or loudest hater, you could maybe pro-con the merits of their massive successes or the nature of their musicality. But one thing there was absolutely zero debating or equivocating about was their mass pop cultural ubiquity, especially during that 94 to 96 window. Hootie, more than just as a band, but as a cultural entity, was seemingly inescapable. They landed hits all over the radio dial across multiple genre formats: top 40 pop, modern rock,
And just let her cry.
adult contemporary,
I only wanna be with you.
the occasional classic rock crossover,
I got a woman drunk all the time.
and even some perennial presence on the stations that do that year-end format switch to 24/7 holiday music.
Chestnuts roasting on an open fire.
They had multiple music videos hit heavy rotation on MTV and VH1, appeared on some pretty popular compilations and soundtracks, won a couple Grammys, landed a Rolling Stone cover, played Letterman like 4 times in '95 alone, and even transcended outside the normal album cycle pop-ups to become reference points on some of the most popular, high-profile television shows of the era, like Saturday Night Live,
I got a bit for you. Any catalog from J. Crew. Sing it with me, hold my hand.
and Friends.
You partied with Hootie and the Blowfish?
Yes, apparently Stevie and Hootie are like this.
Who gave you that hickey? That would be the work of a blowfish.
And of course, the reason we're even talking about them on today's episode is that they also filmed an episode of MTV Unplugged in '96, just shy of 2 years after the release of Cracked Rear View, and aired only a day before the release of their second album, Fairweather Johnson. Now, for a few different reasons I'll get into later, Hootie's episode ended up being an interestingly unconventional Unplugged, but I'll save that story for the intersection. Before we get into that, and my interview with Mark, and a bonus mini interview that provides a fun little button to the whole Hootie Unplugged story, let's first take care of a pair of announcements.
Announcement 1.
A heads up to my Australian listeners, I got a press release this week that an Australian supergroup named Monster are going to be putting on a pretty cool looking retrospective sort of Best of MTV Unplugged tribute show at Memo Music Hall in St. Kilda this August. On a few previous episodes, I have sung the praises of the 2018 MTV Unplugged Live in Melbourne series that gave us that phenomenal Courtney Barnett album, Amy Shark doing an awesome Unplugged cover of Wheatus's Teenage Dirtbag, and a handful of other great moments. But this press release points the Unplugged lens a bit farther back and promises that the Australian foursome will be, quote, bringing to life the unforgettable hits by Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Eagles, Alanis Morissette, Paul McCartney, Rod Stewart, and many more. I really dig the idea of building a concert around this sort of Unplugged's greatest hits framework, and apart from the Eagles being mentioned in the press release, as you may remember from my first episode, this is my biggest sticking point with the inaccurate corners of the collective memory around Unplugged. The Eagles' Hell Freezes Over concert, an album from 1994, is in no way, shape, or form an MTV Unplugged project. Of course, this and the Bon Jovi-inspired Unplugged false myth are the twin load-bearing pillars of my Unplugged penalty box that I fashioned and filled in my first couple episodes. Okay, digression over. Where was I? Oh yes, the MTV Unplugged tribute show by the Australian supergroup Monster. Tickets are currently on sale now for the August 15th show, and fellas, there's still time to make sure you do not include any Eagle songs in the set list, lest I have to make some room for y'all in the Unplugged penalty box as well.
Announcement 2.
It's time to announce the winner of the Heart of Gold vinyl giveaway contest that I've been running over the last 2 episodes. This is the new Neil Young tribute album from Killphonic that has some incredible Neil covers by such Unplugged alumni as Fiona Apple, Eddie Vedder, Courtney Barnett, and Brandi Carlile, as well as a bunch of other really great artists. The winner of the limited edition Daisy White vinyl copy of Heart of Gold is Andrea Vanderhook, who wrote, I love this episode. Neil Young is my all-time favorite. The Unplugged album was one of the core soundtracks of my childhood. Keep on being awesome, and I can't wait for the next episode. Congratulations to Andrea, and your vinyl copy should be on its way to you shortly. Thank you to everyone else who entered and sent along your stories about your connections to Neil and his Unplugged episode and album. If you're interested in snagging your own copy of the limited edition Daisy White vinyl pressing, you can still pre-order it on Killphonic's site right now, store.killphonicrights.com, and the album will officially be released this Friday, April 25th as well. Alright everybody, hold my hand and let's hop on into the Hootie Unplugged intersection. The story of Hootie and the Blowfish can be traced back to the mid-1980s and the University of South Carolina. Fellow USC undergrads Darius Rucker and Mark Bryan met up and first started performing as an acoustic covers duo called the Wolf Brothers before eventually adding in bassist Dean Felber and drummer Brantley Smith and changing their name to Hootie and the Blowfish. By 1989, Smith had left the band for other vocational pursuits and Jim Sony Sonnefeld took over on drums. And the Hootie lineup that still plays to this very day, over 35 years later, was locked in. In 1990, the foursome released a 5-song self-titled demo cassette, which contained an early yet surprisingly almost there version of a little ditty you may be familiar with called Hold My Hand.
With a little love and some tenderness.
The next year, they released another demo cassette, this one called Time, that contained 2 more early yet surprisingly almost there versions of a couple more little ditties you may be familiar with called Time.
Time, why you punish me?
And Let Her Cry.
She sits alone by a lamppost, trying to find a thought that's escaped her mind.
By 93, they had leveled up to putting out their first proper independently released EP, the regrettably titled Coochie Pop, which also contained early yet surprisingly almost there versions of even more little ditties you may be familiar with. A new recording of Hold My Hand,
'Cause I got a hand for you.
Only Wanna Be With You,
You and me, we come from different worlds.
and Old Man and Me. A song that wouldn't get re-recorded for Cracked Rear View, but did pop back up as the lead single to their follow-up record, Fairweather Johnson.
Well, I know that said to me, and our voice filled with pain. Where you going, young man?
So the Coochie Pop EP, and yes, that will be the last time I say that on this episode, is what earned the band their major label record deal with Atlantic Records, and they soon got to work with multi-platinum Grammy-nominated producer Don Gaiman, most notable for his work on the 1976 Stephen Stills-Neil Young collaboration Long May You Run, a multi-album string of John Mellencamp's most popular 80s albums, and most germane to my interest, my beloved R.E.M's 1986 album Life's Rich Pageant. Their major label debut, Cracked Rear View, and yes, that title was just as much of a cheeky entendre as the EP, was released on July 5th, 1994, and its lead single was an only slightly reworked but freshly re-recorded Hold My Hand.
I wanna love you the best that I can.
While the radio-ready Insta-sing-along did well for a debut single, top 10 on the Billboard Hot 100 and AC charts, top 5 on the modern rock charts, it was probably the accompanying Posy Vibes only music video that most readily solidified the group's signature "We're just dudes in a band" musical ethos. Within a popular music ecosystem that was not just reeling, but still in major what's next upheaval following the death of Kurt Cobain just 3 months prior, the band's hooky debut single, immediately identifiable vocalist, unassuming musical demeanor, and completely ridiculous yet unforgettable band name all combined to establish quite the first impression. The remainder of '94 proceeded in a respectable, upward yet measured trajectory. In September, they made their network TV debut on Letterman.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next guests are one of my favorite new bands. Their debut album is entitled Cracked Rear View. I have a copy of it right here in the very popular CD format. Here now to perform a great song. Are you boys ready? Oh, yeah. Is everyone ready? Is Hootie ready? Ladies and gentlemen, Hootie and the Blowfish.
And I should note, I will mention Letterman a couple times in this episode because not only was his show a consistently great platform for musical guests, like In the Realm of Arsenio and Conan and Light Years Beyond Leno, But also, the band has frequently mentioned the seismic impact Letterman had on their early career in multiple interviews over the years. Here's Darius talking to Larry King about it back in 2015.
That was the moment that our career changed. We had been a band for 8 years, played a lot, and we had put out a record, and it was doing okay in the South, but the grunge was king, and nobody wanted to hear "Hold My Hand," it seemed like. And then Letterman, for some reason, one of the stations in New York played our record, and David had heard it on the way home, and pulled the car over and called his booking agent and said, "I want you to get me this band, Hootie and Blowfish." That was a Tuesday, and that Friday we were on the show, and it was honestly, Larry, Thursday we were just another band trying to make it, and Saturday morning everybody was trying to find the Hootie and Blowfish record. It was really one of those things. Letterman made our career, and it was we could never thank him enough.
Okay, back to the timeline. By November 94, Cracked Rear View was certified gold, and in December, they released their second single, Let Her Cry, which once again went top 10 across pop, modern rock, and AC charts.
She says there's the one I love the most, but time's not far behind.
Now, while I've already said that I have never been able to count myself amongst the Hootie target demo, I must admit that I had a brief yet intriguing dalliance with Let Her Cry. And who's to say just how much of that had to do with the hometown divining rods of the song's quasi-homage to the Black Crowes She Talks to Angels, and the always welcome lyrical shout-out to Michael Stipe. But either way, if you ever find me in a Hootie karaoke fever dream, you can bet the house this one's coming out. Also, bonus baller points to Hootie for managing to sneak the name of their first hit song into the lyrics of their second hit song.
Oh, mama, please help me. Won't you hold my hand and let her cry?
Okay, on to 1995, an indelible year for a soon-to-be inescapable band. Building on the measured momentum of the prior year, the band's 95 started by immediately kicking into another higher gear. In January, Cracked Rear View was certified platinum. In February, they were invited back to Letterman. And in March, Cracked Rear View was certified double platinum, and they appeared on that killer alt-rock heavy Led Zeppelin tribute album called Encomium, alongside acts like STP, Four Non Blondes, Sheryl Crow, Rollins Band, Duran Duran, Tori Amos, and many others.
Wanna tell you about this girl I love. Oh my, she looks so fine.
May of 95 ended up being a significantly huge month for the band as well. First making a third trip back to Letterman, then having Cracked Rear View get certified triple and quadruple platinum just a couple weeks apart, and then seeing Cracked Rear View spend its first of 4 consecutive weeks at number 1 on the Billboard 200 albums chart. That summer provided another pivotal escalation point for the band following the mid-July release of their third single, Only Wanna Be With You. The song itself turned out to be the biggest radio hit of their career, peaking at number 6 on the Hot 100, number 3 on the AC chart, and number 2 on the Modern Rock chart. It even went all the way to number 1 in Canada. But I think this song is perhaps more notable for a couple ways it underscored and solidified some foundational characteristics of the band that had been subtly present up to this point, but not yet fully set. First, Only Wanna Be With You was the third consecutive Hootie hit to be popular enough to land top 10 across 3 major charts without any of them reaching number 1 or achieving individual platinum or gold status, while the album itself was still achieving impressive multi-platinum sales. While many rock bands say that they would rather be known for crafting cohesive album statements rather than just scoring 1 or 2 standalone hit singles, Hootie perfectly struck that balance like few other bands have, generating one of the best-selling albums of all time that doesn't actually contain any platinum-selling chart-topping singles. Second, the music video for Only Wanna Be With You not only ratcheted up the good time having, fun loving dude bro vibes to maximum levels, I mean Darius is just straight up doing the Cabbage Patch with his guitar at one point, but it also firmly brought their sports obsessed passions front and center. Sure, Darius had worn a Miami Dolphins hat on their first Letterman appearance, but now this Sports Center Cranked to 11 music video found the frontman wearing a full-on Rucker emblazoned Dolphins jersey while playing catch with Dan Marino on an actual football field. They also played 4-on-4 half-court basketball against real-life NBA players like Alonzo Mourning and Muggsy Bogues, and goofed around while playing golf. Lots and lots of golf. The whole video was even bookended by legit ESPN sportscasters Keith Olbermann, Dan Patrick, and Chris Berman.
As you can see, the world of sports taking a decided downswing in the last few days.
You can't stop Hootie, you can only hope to contain them.
The Only Wanna Be With You music video was most certainly the dividing line between Hootie's college rock influences and their frat rock realities, and I don't mean that disparagingly. While they may have lost a few folks who were casually trying to figure out just exactly what kind of band Hootie was going to be, they were simultaneously amassing a massive like-minded fan base on hundreds of college campuses across the country and continued selling millions of copies of Cracked Rear View every month or two. The month after Only Wanna Be With You was released as a single, Cracked Rear View was certified 6 times platinum, and the band got a lauded Rolling Stone cover piece with the appropriately Hootie-fied headline, Sex, Golf, and Rock and Roll. The month after that, Sheryl Crow and Lenny Kravitz presented them with the Best New Artist Award at the MTV VMAs.
And the winner is Hootie and the Blowfish.
Mid-October 95 may have been the exact point of peak Hootie popularity, as this was the moment where in the span of just a single week, Cracked Rear View was certified Diamond for 10 million albums shipped. The band's concert became a multi-scene plot point runner on the massively popular television show Friends.
Hey Chandler, what is in that envelope?
By the way, this didn't seem so dorky out in the hall.
Come on.
Why, it's 6 tickets to Hootie and the Blowfish.
And 2 nights later, a sketch centered around both the band and their overly caricaturized frat bro fan base opened up the David Schwimmer, Natalie Merchant episode of Saturday Night Live.
Chug a beer, start a fight. The life of New York is Saturday night, yeah.
After that seismic pop culture apex point, Hootie closed out the remainder of 95 by having their cover of Canadian alt-rockers 5440's I Go Blind appear alongside R.E.M., Katie Lang, Toad the Wet Sprocket, The Pretenders, and more on the Friends compilation CD. Releasing Time as the 4th single from Cracked Rear View, which went top 20 on the Hot 100, top 5 on the AC chart, and garnered them a second Canadian number 1. Releasing Drowning as the 5th single from Cracked Rear View, which didn't chart on the Hot 100, landed just outside the modern rock top 20, and remains notable for possibly being the only song to reference both Public Enemy and Nancy Griffith. Seeing Cracked Rear View get certified 11 times platinum, and perhaps most surprisingly, considering the average age of the rest of the artist, was invited to perform The Lady is a Tramp at Frank Sinatra's 80 Years My Way birthday special that aired in mid-December 94.
That's why the lady is a tramp.
Much as they did in 95, Hootie started off 96 on another impressive tear. In January, they received another platinum certification for Cracked Rear View, bringing the count up to 12, and netted 5 nominations at the American Music Awards, bringing home a win for Favorite Pop Rock New Artist. In February, they had quite a night at the 96 Grammys, performing I'm Going Home during the ceremony, and winning both Grammys for which they were nominated. Best Pop Performance by a Duo or Group, and one of the celebrated Big Four, Best New Artist, which was presented to them by Tupac Shakur and a recently reunited Kiss, who were wearing their iconic 70s era makeup and costumes for the first time in 15 years. Tupac, Kiss, and Hootie made for quite the scene.
And the Grammy goes to, my other homeboys, Hootie and the Blowfish.
Hard to know if it was the infamous Grammys bump or just the album's continuing runaway success, but 2 weeks after the broadcast, Cracked Rear View passed another platinum mile marker, bringing their total to 13 platinum certifications in roughly just a 15-month window. And that brings us to April 96 and Hootie's intersection with MTV Unplugged.
Hi, I'm Allison Stewart. Welcome back to Hootie Come Home, an MTV News visit coming to you from the University of South Carolina here in Columbia, where Hootie and the Blowfish will perform on MTV Unplugged in about 20 minutes.
By 96, Unplugged was in a really interesting position. Tony Bennett's widely well-received Unplugged had just won 2 Grammys at the 95 ceremony, including Album of the Year, the show's second such honor after Eric Clapton's win 2 years prior. And the show had just come off a phenomenal 95 season that featured some truly amazing episodes from the likes of Sheryl Crow, Hole, The Cranberries, Melissa Etheridge, Live, and others. But it was a season that seemed a bit marked by restraint, possibly aimed at appeasing the rumbling accusations of oversaturating the market, as only one of the season's US-based episodes, Kiss, got an actual album release. So as the Unplugged crew started prepping for their 7th season in early '96, an interesting opportunity started unfolding with a proposed Hootie episode. Now, from a timing perspective, I should note that while Hootie's Unplugged ended up being the season opener, it was not the first 96 episode to actually be filmed. That honor would go to a trio of stunners, Seal, Alice in Chains, and Tori Amos, which were all filmed back to back to back at the gorgeous Brooklyn Academy of Music between April 9th and April 11th. But just a week and a day after wrapping on that conventionally intimate and indoor 3-episode filming session, the Unplugged crew found themselves setting up shop on the University of South Carolina's historic Horseshoe and brainstorming how to navigate some rainy weather and a rowdy audience of a couple thousand USC students to film the very first outdoor Unplugged. Now, Unplugged wasn't necessarily averse to creative experimentation. They had hip-hop groups play with live acoustic instrumentation, did a couple spoken word poetry episodes, had a stand-up comedian, and the Hootie Unplugged kind of feels in that same vein of let's tweak the formula a bit and see what happens. The two main ways they did that was to A, have the performance be outdoors with a bigger, more concert-like audience, though they still had a few rows of fans on stage behind the band to evoke a bit of that in-the-round vibe. And B, have the performance be framed around the release of a brand new album, as Hootie was set to release their second album, Fairweather Johnson, the day after their Unplugged was broadcast, which itself was only filmed a couple days prior, also a tweak to the normal formula as that only gave like a 2-day editing window. Of those two major tweaks, being outdoors and built around a brand new album release, I actually think the second one might have been more impactful to the overall unconventionality of the show than the first. Meaning, sure, from within the Unplugged aesthetic, it was a little visually jarring to see the band on an outdoor stage with a typical concert-style audience, but I think more potentially disorienting was that from within the Unplugged ethos, it was a little odd for the first impressions of a new album to be experienced through its acoustic variations. To me, that's one of the important foundational elements of the whole Unplugged experience, being able to reframe familiar songs via an alternate acoustic context. But this was a curious tweak to that. It was introducing brand new songs via an alternate acoustic context, which is an unconventional method for promoting a brand new album coming out the next day. Now, don't get me wrong, I completely understand that a version of this happens all the time with morning radio promo tours, where a couple band members promote a new album by playing a casual, low-stakes acoustic version of its lead single, whose electric version is probably already familiar to listeners because it's been playing on the station for a couple weeks by then. But Unplugged, the television show, was not that at all. To that point, Hootie's Unplugged broadcast smartly didn't feature an acoustic version of Fairweather Johnson's current lead single, Old Man and Me, which I think was an intentional move to not take away from its in-progress success on radio, as the single ended up going top 10 on the Modern Rock chart and top 20 on the Hot 100 and AC charts. In fact, even more evidence to the intentionality of not doing acoustic versions of Fairweather singles, their Unplugged broadcast also didn't include an acoustic version of the album's eventual second single, Tuckerstown, even though it wouldn't even be released for another couple months. All of this may sound like I'm saying that Hootie's Unplugged wasn't successful, which I'm not. There are a lot of notable positives, which I'll get into in just a second. And I should also note that Hootie fans seem to really view their Unplugged as a standout show and have been clamoring for years to hopefully one day see it get a proper release. And to be sure, it's extremely, quintessentially a Hootie homecoming, even down to it taking place on the USC campus, then bringing out original Hootie drummer Brantley Smith to play cello on a couple songs, and Darius wearing a Gamecocks hat and dropping in a few jabs at their in-state rivals, Clemson University.
We got one up on Clemson now. They got the Panthers now.
At one point, I think he even sang a few bars of the school's alma mater.
Hail the Carolina, dun, 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 dun.
Another cool Hootie-esque side note about the show is that around this time, the band had decided to start a Hootie and the Blowfish 4-year scholarship at USC, and they ended up selling a special limited edition Hootie Unplugged t-shirt at the taping, with the proceeds going straight into that scholarship fund. And make sure you stick around to the end of my interview with Mark to hear a cool little button on that particular story loop. Getting into the actual high points of Hootie's Unplugged, here are a couple of the notable things that I think are worth checking out, even if you don't consider yourself amongst the Hootie fandom. And I should note, even though they didn't release this as an album, the episode is available to view if you're a Paramount Plus subscriber. Okay, first, the reworked originals. While I'm personally still of the mind that introducing fans to the new Fairweather Johnson songs through alternate acoustic versions was a tricky gamble, I will say that the acoustic Cracked Rear View songs they did sounded pretty cool, especially its big radio singles. They bookended the show with a laid-back, drumless version of Time that featured Sony playing a djembe and a boisterous all-skate sing-along version of Hold My Hand that probably made its way into a couple USC recruitment videos. Somewhere in the middle of all that, they also beautifully augmented Let Her Cry with a string quartet. Second, their special guests. The band also brought along some incredible special guests for the night. First, as far as artists, they had the amazing singer-songwriter Nanci Griffith and Toad the Wet Sprocket frontman Glenn Phillips both appear on quite a few songs, old and new. Nanci and Glenn both sang on a pair of tracks each on the actual Fairweather album, but they ended up both hanging around for a substantial amount of the Unplugged set. The band also invited along violinist Lily Hayden, who not only added quite a few fiery moments to Running from an Angel and Hold My Hand, but who also helped arrange the larger string ensemble on a couple songs. Also notable mention goes to Peter Holsapple, who was an integral multi-instrumentalist in their touring band, playing piano, accordion, guitar, and mandolin during the taping, and who was also making his second Unplugged appearance after playing guitar, bass, and Hammond organ during REM's first Unplugged back in 1991. Third, my favorite element of the whole performance are their cover songs. As I already said, I think one thing Hootie does really well is cover songs, both in the way they pick them and play them. During their Unplugged taping, they knocked out 2 incredible covers. First, a full band run-through of Gravity of the Situation by the legendary Athens singer-songwriter Vic Chestnut. Their version features Darius and Nanci's impeccable dual vocals, and a studio version of it can be found on the alt-rock-centric Sweet Relief 2 compilation that came out just a few months later, which featured all Vic Chestnut covers done by bands like REM, Garbage, Indigo Girls, Smashing Pumpkins, Soul Asylum, and perhaps surprising to, well, just about everyone, Madonna. Fun Unplugged side note, the year prior, the band live also covered a Vic Chestnut song, Supernatural, during their Unplugged, and that exact version can also be found on the Sweet Relief 2 album.
It was an out-of-body experience, yes, I flew around a hospital.
The second equally beautiful cover they did that night was a bare bones, one guitar, one voice version of Tom Waits' I Hope That I Don't Fall in Love With You, featuring just Darius and Mark. Tom Waits is one of my all-time favorite artists, and he has such a unique musical vision that not all covers of his songs hit the mark. This one kinda nails it though, I really dig it.
Well, I turn around and look at you, you light a cigarette. Wish I had the guts to bum one.
So, a few post-Unplugged Hootie notes, since the episode was so closely tied to the Fairweather Johnson album release. After their Unplugged performance, the Fairweather Johnson album had a brief window of commercial success. In May, the album spent 2 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard 200, replacing Rage Against the Machine's Evil Empire and being replaced by the Fugees' The Score. In June, the album was certified double platinum and Tuckerstown was released as the second single, but it barely cracked the top 40, only peaking at number 38, which ended up being the last of the band's singles to chart on the Billboard Hot 100.
I'll pack your bags 'cause I don't know what I can see.
And this is kind of where the Fairweather Johnson album stalls out, but without exactly taking the band down with it. In many respects, Hootie, and especially Cracked Rear View, remained pretty firmly ensconced in the pop cultural consciousness. Throughout the rest of the decade, the band that was equally praised and pilloried for the audacity of their normalcy continued to experience some pretty high-profile successes and potshots. For example, they released their third album, Musical Chairs, in the fall of '98, and it went platinum about a month and a half after release, though that ended up being the album's only commercial milestone. Fairweather Johnson got its 3 times platinum certification around the same time, which ended up being that album's last commercial milestone as well. All while Cracked Rear View continued selling like crazy, hitting 15 times platinum in '97 and 16 times platinum in '99. And throughout all that, or more accurately in direct response to it, you'd also see things like Trent Reznor in Rolling Stone, when trying to make a point about the lack of inherent rebellion and danger in rock music, summing up his entire argument by saying, "Death to Hootie and the Blowfish, you know?" Instead, Hootie, and most certainly Cracked Rear View, seems to have achieved some measure of pop cultural immortality. Cracked Rear View entered the 2000s at 16 times platinum, was certified double diamond in 2018, and again, just last year, crossed over into 22 times platinum. And who knows, maybe with next year marking the 30th anniversary of Fairweather Johnson, their '96 Unplugged show might achieve a little longevity of life by finally getting a proper standalone album release. As you'll hear in my interview with Mark, that at least seems to be a potential option as the band looks to next year's anniversary activities. So speaking of my interview with Mark, let's go ahead and get into it. And again, make sure you stay through to the end for a nice little bonus story about that Hootie and the Blowfish college scholarship I mentioned earlier. So here's my Unplugged Revisited chat with Mark Bryan of Hootie and the Blowfish. For today's show, I've got the good fortune of talking to double diamond certified rock star Mark Bryan of Hootie and the Blowfish, one of the most ubiquitously popular bands of the 90s and among the best-selling artists of all time. My immense thanks for joining the show today to talk MTV Unplugged with me, Mark.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, before we get into any questions about getting to play your own MTV Unplugged in '96, I was curious to know your thoughts about Unplugged in the years leading up to that. Like, were you a fan of the show or had any of the album releases from that early to mid '90s period?
I was a big fan of the show. I did not have any album releases from it, but I remember watching several of them, and being blown away by it. The big ones were like Clapton and Nirvana and stuff, but there's so many cool ones. I remember the STP one was really cool.
Right.
And that one stood out to me.
Yeah.
It was like you got to see these grunge songs broken down as real song, like singer-songwriter songs. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, that one is always a standout for me. It was super cool to see Scott singing from a rocking chair, which was kind of wild. And then you really got to hear Robert's bass lines as well. Sometimes the bass lines get buried. So
I'm a big Robert fan too. So he's fantastic.
So good.
That's a great band.
Right. Yeah. So once it was official that you guys were going to be doing your own Unplugged, what kind of creative discussions were going on as far as how y'all did and did not want to approach it?
It was really cool a time for us because we had a bunch of new music with Fairweather Johnson coming out right in that moment. In fact, the Unplugged itself was scheduled around the release of the record, so we knew we were going to be doing a bunch of those new songs acoustic. And then we had Nancy Griffith sing on the record, and we had Glenn Phillips from Toad, the Wet Sprockets, sing on the record. So we invited both of them to sing their parts on the new songs, which I think was super cool for the show and for us as being big fans of both. So it was a really exciting moment with all of our new music in that moment and getting to share with those guests. And then we did the coolest thing. We had our original drummer, Brantley Smith, play cello. And we had a 4-piece string quartet arranged by Lily Hayden, who's a pretty renowned violin player from LA, who played on Running from an Angel and on the album and everything. So we had her arrange the strings, and we brought in our original drummer, Brantley, to play cello in the string quartet, which I just thought was just so cool. So we had all 5 members of Hootie and the Blowfish on stage at the same time.
Right. If playing in South Carolina wasn't a homecoming enough, having original drummer on stage again.
Yeah, on national TV. So, I mean, just spectacular. And then Darius had the idea of, hey, Mark, learn this song by Tom Waits. And then that was the first time we ever did I Hope That I Don't Fall in Love with You was on that.
Really?
Yeah. I learned it for that show. And in fact, the first time we went through, I kind of stumbled over the finger picking, and I was like, hey, is it cool if we do it again? They were like, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we did 2 takes.
Oh, wow. That sort of brilliantly bare, just one voice, one guitar. It sounded like y'all had been playing that for decades. That's one of the absolute standout moments. It's so beautiful.
It is a fun little moment. Great memory for me. I remember being really nervous, but like being so in love with that song. And it was a cool moment for sure.
Do you remember kind of what inspired Darius to even ask you to learn it in the first place?
It's just one of those songs that he had been listening to. Like, whoever was driving the van got to pick the music back in those days, in the early days. And Tom Waits was just one of those, especially Closing Time was one of those albums that would be in his rotation. And so we would all fall in love with each other's music through hearing it up. But that was one of his that would pop. Like Bonnie Raitt would always pop up with him. Rodney Foster would always pop up. Don Dixon.
Nice.
And that time, and Closing Time was often in the rotation. And so it wasn't surprising to, and I guess I already knew the song from that, but I had never played it until the Unplugged. So that was exciting.
Oh, wow. Well, if that was your first time playing that in concert, man, you knocked it out.
Thanks. It took 2 takes, but thank you.
Well, another amazing thing about y'all's Unplugged was this was also the first one that was filmed outdoors. So I was curious, where did that idea to actually play on the University of South Carolina campus originally come from?
It may have been Darius. I can't remember. But, that sounds like something he would say. Let's do it on the Horseshoe. And I guess he was right, or whoever came up with it. It might have been something where we approached the university and they said, well, hey, we'd love to showcase the Horseshoe. I can't remember, to be honest with you.
Okay.
But it was the right idea for sure. And the way it was lit and arranged and laid out was spectacular.
Yeah. I was reading some old newspaper articles and I read that it was like super rainy that day, but luckily it just kind of like stopped enough before the show that it ended up being okay.
Yeah, that sounds right. I
was also curious, did MTV, once that idea was floated to do it outdoors, did MTV give any pushback on how that might alter the, unplugged precedent of the small studio intimate audience?
Yeah, I think there was, we were surprised and excited that they agreed to do it outside. And I remember there being some talk around that, like, hey, it might have been the first one they did outside the studio.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so there you go. That wasn't something they were used to doing. And I think part of it was just the fact that it was around our second album release as well. It made it such a big event that it sort of, I think for them, was like, it's okay to step outside of our normal thing because this is for an album release or whatever. So I'd like to hear their side of it now, but I remember being, like excited that they were open to doing that because I think it worked out great. I mean, the look of it was tremendous and it sounded great. And I think made a lot of people take notice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about the set list. So the broadcast was like 10 songs, but I was reading that reports of that night, you guys actually did about, 15 to 17 songs, something like that. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
So of those 10 that aired, just to sort of set some context, let's start with the 4 that were broadcast from Crack Rear View. The broadcast featured 3 of the album's 4 big hits, but you tweaked them all like in some really cool ways. So first, tell us about that sort of chilled out, no drums version of Time that you guys kicked off the show with.
I believe it was like djembe that Sony used to play on that. And it's just a way to hit the kick drum and the snare hit, but just on one drum, just a boom, ga, boom, boom, ga. And it was a way to do like an acoustic version of Time and still had that groove going.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, it was the djembe. And that's what it comes down to for any song. Can you establish the groove? And we just found different instruments to do it with.
Yeah, yeah.
And and I just played everything the same on acoustic as I would on electric, and I think I added my little tube screamer pedal to the acoustic for leads just to have some sustain on them, on the leads.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And I think Cobain does the same thing, and
right, yeah.
You can tell where he's hitting pedals and shit,
Yeah.
So it's that I think that was it. It was pretty stripped down. Other than that, I was playing just my J100 acoustic, A little mandolin too, yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you did play mandolin. I remember seeing
First
that.
Stop Cold at Dawn or whatever, yeah. And we had Peter Holzapfel. He was still pretty new with us at the time, and he had done a bunch of shows with us already. But it was within the first year of playing with Peter.
Oh, nice.
He was a big part of the show.
Yeah, yeah. He was on like piano, accordion, and acoustic guitar. Like he was just seems like every song he was hopping around. Yeah.
Yeah. He was always like the second part that would, where we would play in the studio that you couldn't play live. He could do it no matter what the instrument was. He's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had one of my listeners just actually tell me recently that that was actually Peter's second time on Unplugged. I knew Peter had played on the 91 REM Unplugged, but I hadn't registered that he played with you guys as well. So that was pretty cool. The other two songs, the ones from Cracked Rear View, the big hits, y'all augmented Let Her Cry and Hold My Hand with a really cool sounding string quartet. Had y'all played with a string ensemble before?
No, I mean, I can't say never, but like never for a full show like that, where we had full arrangements. Like I said, we had Lily do arrangements for the songs, and then we had Brantley come in and play cello, and then the second violin too is an old buddy of ours, Dan Cook from the band Lake Wyatt, a while in Columbia, and so he was part of that. It was just cool having old friends, in the actual string quartet. And I think it allowed us to do unique versions. Hey, we're in an acoustic setting anyway. We might as well add these beautiful stringed instruments to these arrangements and see what happens. And Lily did a really nice job with the string arrangements. And then we had a rehearsal beforehand to make sure everybody's on the same page. And I thought it was great.
That's awesome. And then for the 4 new songs that made the broadcast from Fairweather Johnson, which came out like the next day after the broadcast, I thought that's also one of the cool things is I think you guys recorded it on April 19th and it aired on the 22nd, like 3 days later, which was absolutely the quickest turnaround time for an Unplugged, which was cool. But was there any worry or back and forth about introducing these new songs in a different sonic context than what listeners might hear on the album?
Interesting. Well put. It's a great question. We weren't too worried about it just because nobody even really knew the songs yet to begin with. I think, I think we chose songs that lent themselves to being more acoustic based anyway. In that set, we weren't doing the harder rock tracks maybe. And then also Alex from MTV was super cool about that, about just like, it was we kept it about the choreography and just the arrangements of that night, like a good live show should be,
Yeah. I was curious. I think I remember Old Man and Me was the radio single at the time. And that was a pretty big upbeat song. Did you guys, it wasn't in the broadcast, but did you guys even play it that night acoustically or just?
Great question. I don't know. I'd have to see that list,
I think it was, even if y'all did play it, I think it was interesting to not have it on the broadcast, especially with that one being on the radio at the time.
It's interesting that, and that's probably why we didn't, is like, hey, that's the single that's out there, and let's do some songs that are more catered to the acoustic vibe. And, that's why you had Her Stopped. And I think we did So Strange.
Yeah. That one had the string quartet on it too.
That worked really well with the strings. Yeah.
Perfect. Of the 2 phenomenal cover songs y'all did, we've already talked a little bit about I Hope That I Don't Fall in Love with You, but let's also talk about the unplugged version of Vic Chestnut's Gravity of the Situation, which a studio version of that actually came out a few months later on that Sweet Relief compilation. Tell us how that beautiful duet version between Nancy and Darius, kind of came to be.
It's, we were in the studio making Fairweather, and I think Nancy had been asked to be on the Vic Chestnut compilation record that was to go out and benefit musicians that needed care, needed insurance and medical care. And it was a big compilation that was being put together for that purpose. And when Nancy was asked to do it, that was, I think, her idea of like, hey, I would love to do this as a duet with Darius. And it just so happened that we were in the studio making Fairweather at the time. And so she came in to do that. And then we had her sing on Earth Stop Cold at Dawn on our album. So it was a double whammy.
Yeah. That's a nice combo to have. That's a good day in the studio right there.
Yeah. And then both of those songs appeared on the Unplugged,
Oh, I love it. As born and raised in Georgia, Vic Chestnut is somebody that I pull into the fold. Even though he was Athens, I pull him into the fold as a hometown hero. But as a fun little trivia question, just to ask you, did you know that there was actually another band who covered Vic Chestnut during their Unplugged session? Did you ever catch the band live, their Unplugged from the year prior?
I probably saw it back in the day. I mean, I was a fan of them as well.
Yeah, they did Supernatural on their Unplugged as well. So it's kind of cool having those two. I was like, all right, Unplugged, man. People are pulling out incredible covers.
He's a good artist for that, right? Because his songs are deep and, they're good for that setting and that moment,
Yeah. Well, big question here. Hootie fans will be utterly incensed if I didn't ask you, but do you think we'll ever see an official MTV Unplugged album release from you guys? Next year would be the 30th.
Yeah, it's funny that you should say that because we're talking about what we might do for the 30th anniversary of Fairweather Johnson. And we just had the 30th anniversary of Cracked Review last year while we were on tour. And so we started saying, hey, wait, what are we going to do for Fairweather? So I think that Unplugged would be a good piece of that.
Nice.
For sure.
Yeah.
We've been talking about what to do and been finding, digging up some archives. We've got some cool unreleased tracks from that time.
Oh, nice.
Several. So there's a potential collection there. And I think that the Unplugged would be a really cool part of it.
That would be so great. I tell you, it feels like more and more artists are kind of like last year, 10,000 Maniacs finally put their Unplugged out on vinyl for the first time. Eric Clapton is doing like an extended reissue that's coming out in May of his full show. And, they just did the Paramount Plus drop so folks can see the Hootie Unplugged on Paramount Plus.
Oh, cool. That would look cool as a vinyl. It's not something we've ever really talked about, but that would be a nice vinyl piece for sure. And you do it in partnership with MTV and have the logo and everything. It's cool.
Yeah. Even either a full release or even if you guys do it for Record Store Day, a couple bands have been putting their Unplugs out for Record Store Day.
Yeah, so that's a really cool idea. And it definitely goes with the 30th anniversary of Fairweather since we released it around that to begin with.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, everybody, you heard it here first. Fingers crossed that we'll be looking for that next year.
That's great, man.
Okay, let me pause the interview here for just a quick second to set up the little present day postscript about that Hootie and the Blowfish College Scholarship Fund. Quick backstory. While I was doing some research for this episode, I came across an old newspaper article from 1996 about how the band had started this whole Hootie and the Blowfish scholarship and about the t-shirts being sold at the Unplugged taping to help fund it. And the article actually mentioned the name of the incoming USC freshman who had won the 4-year Hootie and the Blowfish scholarship. So I did a little internet sleuthing, and it turns out there's a fun little ironic twist at the end of this story. And well, just here, I'll just play the tape.
My name is Gloria Cass, and in 1996, I was awarded the Hootie and the Blowfish Scholarship.
Amazing. It's so great to get to talk to you today. I really appreciate you responding to my completely random shot in the dark email. And thank you so much for being here.
Well, it's a pleasure to speak to you, and I'm just honored that somebody remembers that event. It seems like so long ago.
Right? Yeah, this is a reminder to all of y'all. Everything is digitized nowadays, but I found her through an old newspaper article, so physical media matters.
It does. It really does.
So 1996, you were a high school senior. Give us a little bit of the timeline and backstory behind your memories of like first hearing about the scholarship, applying for it, finding out you won, all that sort of stuff.
Well, I have to say, I feel like I cheated a little because I actually didn't apply for it. I was put in the running for it by a family friend's daughter who worked at the financial aid office. So, and I didn't know that's how I got it until many years later after I had already graduated college. Of course, I still had to earn the award, but she had put my name in the running to be considered because it was originally for a nursing student. Darius Rucker's mother never had the opportunity to go to college, and she wanted to be a nurse. So they had made it in her honor, and they wanted it to go to preferably a nursing student, which I wasn't. I was a business student, but I guess I must have, they must have liked me, so they gave it to me.
Awesome. Very cool. Okay. Yeah. I should say that that's a great point you're making about Darius's mother, because I think technically the scholarship was Hootie and the Blowfish / Carolyn Rucker scholarship. So they put her name in there too. So that makes sense. How about your overall musical taste circa 96, especially living in South Carolina? Were you a hometown Hootie fan at all?
I would like to say that I was, but to be honest, my musical tastes were a typical teenager all over the place.
Yeah.
So they were in my radar, but I was not exclusively a fan of their music. I liked Green Day a lot at the time. There was a great deal of teenage angst involved with that, I believe. I also really just was into old school 60s, 70s rock because that's what I grew up listening to. Pre-internet days, you learned about music through the people you knew, and my father was very much into that old, I call it old, it's not old. Oh, now I'm old. It was his music, and I grew up listening to a lot of Cream and Rolling Stones and even some 50s music and my grandmother's old school country.
Yeah.
So I would say my musical tastes were really just run the gamut.
Awesome. Okay. I love that. I was very curious. I know you said you didn't actually fill out the application yourself, but I was curious if that was one of the questions on the application. How big of a Hootie fan are you? That's their, secret deciding factor. How did you end up even finding out that you won? Was it just, letter in the mail kind of thing, or how did that happen?
Yeah, literally a letter in the mail from the university. And again, this was pre-internet, and we didn't have cable because I grew up in the country. And so I didn't have MTV either. I was a bit sheltered when it came to that. And I got this letter in the mail that said, you have received a scholarship from Hootie and the Blowfish. And I thought, what? Like, I was very confused. I thought it was fake at first. I thought, this is not real. What is this? And then I found out that it was. And of course, I was excited. But honestly, it was just a big surprise all around.
And how about, at least from like a timing perspective, did you actually get to go to that Hootie Unplugged taping at USC?
I did not. It was after the fact. They took the proceeds from the concert and they put them towards the scholarship to establish it. And I believe I was the first recipient.
Awesome.
From what I understand. So, yeah, I did get a t-shirt, though, and I got to later when I was attending USC, I think it was my senior year, I was at a tailgate, and I got to say hello to Darius and thank him personally. But, yeah, I didn't get to see the concert up close.
Oh, okay. That's so cool that you got a face-to-face. That's amazing. And I have to ask, do you still have the shirt, or is it lost to the sands of time?
After you reached out to me, I actually went to look for it and I couldn't find it. I have kept it though over the years. And when I eventually do my spring cleaning in my closet, I'm going to look for it again to see if I can find it.
Right. There you go. I haven't looked yet, but maybe after our conversation, I'll see on eBay, maybe if anyone has one out there, see how much they're going for these days.
That would be great.
Right. Well, the USC Clemson rivalry, I know, is a big deal there in South Carolina. Darius even mentions it at the beginning of the Unplugged taping, and he's wearing a USC hat during the show. So is it a big deal that you are a USC alumni who is actually now working for Clemson, or is that like a common thing around that area?
I would say it's pretty common. There's a lot of people that I work with that are USC graduates and Clemson graduates alike, and then it's a friendly rivalry. We'll put it that way. Serious but friendly rivalry. I like to take pride in the fact that I have a point of connection with both of those institutions.
Yeah. Okay. So on game day, are your loyalties divided, or does one lean over the other?
I will admit, I will support USC over Clemson when it comes to football. I just can't help it. That's where my heart lies in that regard.
Yeah. Well, that's good. They'll love to hear that, because, that's one of the things about this story that cracks me up, is it feels like that Clemson getting a USC grad that got the Hootie scholarship to get them through USC. It seems like that, you kind of helped Clemson get the last laugh on that. So I think that's fantastic.
There was one other thing I just wanted to add, circling back to the scholarship originally being for Darius Rucker's mother. At the time, like I said, my degree is in business. I feel like life has a way of circling around because my current trajectory in my work is I was working for grant-funded programs that reach out to the community, and I'm currently working in grants administration. And a lot of the grants and the faculty I support, even though they work for Clemson, they are public health and nursing. And so I feel like maybe things come full circle. I'm still supporting that cause and helping to support that original intent.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that. First of all, thank you for the work that you're doing, but also that really does feel like a quite apropos closing of the circle. That's incredible. Thank you so much for talking with me today, Loria. This interesting little button on the story brings me so much joy, and I really appreciate your time and being such a good sport talking with me about it today.
All right. Thank you so much, Will. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. Have a good one. And go Gamecocks, right?
Yes.
Hilarious, right? What a fun little story. Okay, let's finish up my chat with Mark. Last question, or really this one's just more of sort of a funny, ironic story to bring it back to the present day. Do you remember that at the Unplugged gig, you guys were selling limited edition t-shirts and the money went to a Hootie and the Blowfish scholarship to be paid out to an incoming USC freshman that fall?
I had forgotten that, but that sounds exactly like something we would have done at the time. And that sounds like a really good idea.
Okay, well, something that is very cool about this story, just to bring it to the present day, is I looked up the winner of who won that 4-year scholarship.
Nice.
And I found out that she is now a manager and grants administrator, and dramatic drum roll, she's at Clemson University.
Oh, there he is.
So even though Darius started the Unplugged gig by saying we got one up on Clemson, it looks like Clemson actually cleverly returned the favor by professionally benefiting from a USC graduate who was assisted by Hootie and the Blowfish's college scholarship funded by t-shirt sales from that Unplugged gig.
That's great. Well, if you know anything about South Carolina, you know that Clemson and the Gamecocks are inextricably linked. There's no way around it. It's a love-hate relationship of all time. You have people with bumper stickers on their cars that say "house divided" and it's like half garnet and half orange. That kind of thing. I mean, it's just part of our state, and it runs right down the middle of the state. And it's kind of cool living in Charleston because neither of the colleges are here, right? So
yeah.
If you're in Columbia, you're Gamecock. If you're upstate, you're Clemson. So down in Charleston. I only moved here 25 years ago, Charleston. But I didn't grow up here, but what I noticed as soon as I moved here is that most Charleston people are kind of neutral about it. We love them both. We hope they both win, that kind of thing.
Right.
Can't get away with around the rest of the state. So
exactly.
But I'm Gamecock through and through, and it's just everybody in our band is obviously, and you hate Clemson, but you got to have respect for the success they've had. And, you play them every year, so you got to be sportsmanlike about it. And it's a lot of fun. A lot of good natured ribbing goes on in this state every year.
Right. Well, that's even one more element. If you do end up a vinyl version, you can press it on garnet and black colors. So to go a step further.
You heard it here first, folks. You heard it here first.
That's awesome. Well, Mark, thank you again so much for being on the show today and taking us back almost 30 years to talk Unplugged. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's fun to talk about that. Nice and nostalgic. I enjoy it. So thanks, man.
And there we go. My thanks to Mark for taking some time to chat with me in the midst of a really crazy day for him. And also thanks to Loria for answering the random email of a stranger with a podcast. And I'll just say, much like my last 2 episodes on the trio of Neil Young Unplugged performances, it would be super cool if these conversations and episodes could contribute in any way to maybe getting some new Unplugged album releases. I'll for sure keep you posted if I hear any future chatter to that effect. Okay, another Unplugged Revisited in the books. If you want to connect with the show for any questions, corrections, or anything else, you can email me, unpluggedrevisited@gmail.com, or leave a voicemail by calling 234-REVISIT, or reach out on social media. As always, please take a moment to follow the pod on your platform of choice so that it'll automatically pop into your feed when it goes live. As far as a little teaser for my next episode, it'll be another artist interview with someone who also played Unplugged in '96, and it also has a tiny little Friends connection. And well, I'll just say, in a nutshell, unless you're down in a hole, friends don't let friends miss the next episode. No excuses. Until then, my friends, be kind to yourself and look out for each other.
Unplugged Revisited is a Son of a Butch production. The show is written and hosted by me, Will Hodge. The show is edited by Amanda Hodge and myself. Podcast artwork is by Jordan Ullum, and you can find more of their incredible work at jordanullum.design. That's JORDANULLOM.design.
That is the beauty